The Prime Minister is back from his trip to Asia, where he worked to secure new trading partners, and he's setting the stage for his highly anticipated budget this week. Mark Carney calls this an investment budget. It's also a budget that he says that will require sacrifices, but it could also end up costing Carney his government. At 169 seats, the Liberal minority is just 3 votes shy of passing its budget. If they can't find those 3 MPs to either vote with them or abstain, Canadians could be sent back to the polls for an early election.
Are you prepared to fight an election on this budget?
I'm always prepared to stand up for the right thing.
While the Prime Minister says he's ready to fight, opposition parties have sent a message to the Prime Minister: follow through with our demands or you won't get our support. It is still unclear right now who's going to support this Liberal budget as the minority government faces its first big confidence test. Let's bring back the Sunday Scrum. Emilie, Nicolas, columnist for Le Devoir. Stephanie Levitz, a senior reporter in the Globe and Mail's Parliament Hill Bureau. Ryan Tumilty is a Toronto Star political reporter here in Ottawa. Emilie, I'm going to start with you. I guess, what are you anticipating Tuesday will be like in terms of how the vision that the government's going to set forward, and then how those opposition parties respond, because they all seem to just be sort of waiting and keeping their powder dry?
So in terms of the opposition party, just from listening to the interviews you did on the beginning of the show, it seems to me that the NDP is going to be blinking, and so that's where the votes are going to come from. As far as the vision of the government, I think it's going to take us a lot of time as journalists to unpack everything in the budget. There's going to be a lot of different announcements in there. We got used to have kind of a budget striptease of different policies. It's been more of a let's get it all out on Tuesday this time around. I think there's going to be a lot of things and people who are watching for climate that are going to be disappointing. I think in terms of the economy, there's going to be massive announcements that will need a lot to unpack as well. In terms of where the cuttings will be and what are investments and what will be still done, it will also take a lot of time for a lot of people to digest. I also think in terms of the opposition party, the Conservative will oppose. That's the official position. And as far as the Bloc Québécois is concerned, we are today in a municipal election in Quebec, and the provincial government is going into a crisis. And so I think it's worth for people to understand that the Bloc is playing games in Parliament with literally no one in Quebec paying attention to Ottawa right now, because everybody's busy with provincial and municipal election as far as the Bloc electorate is, and so they're speaking a really great game, but they're speaking it in English only as far as airtime is concerned right now.
Right. Yeah, it's not penetrating. That's interesting.
No.
Yeah. Steph, what are you going to be watching for on Tuesday? I mean, I said in our newsletter this morning, it's actually a budget that sometimes you can just sort of skim a budget. That's not going to be the case here. We're really going to have to dig in and try to figure out where everything is and where it's going.
I think that's exactly it. And I'll reflect, in the short tenure Mr. Carney has been prime minister in this country, communications are not always his strong suit, nor that of the current iteration of his government. And, they've made choices. They've made choices not to roll out anything before. And again, that's a choice. But I'm curious to see how they communicate it all, Rosemary, how they package it, how they sell it to Canadians, how much of what is in there on Tuesday is the exact same thing that Mr. Carney ran on in the most recent spring election, because should, I suppose, the government fall in a matter of weeks, so help us all, we're heading to a winter election, and effectively this budget would become the platform. So is this a continuation of what he's previously promised? And I'm also really looking for, and with great anticipation, although I'll probably end up disappointed, is detail, specifics. If they are really truly cutting spending to the way they say they are, what are they cutting and how are they doing it? And what are they going to do, if anything, to mitigate some of the blow of those cuts? Because it could be very real for people.
Yep. Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be really interesting to see this budget as sort of the full Carney doctrine. The government has not only not revealed things about the budget in advance, but they've crammed other things that aren't traditionally part of the budget into Tuesday. So Canada's new immigration levels are going to be revealed as part of the budget. We expect some of the climate competitiveness strategy to be part of this budget. So we're really going to get this final picture of what Mark Carney intends to do with the government of Canada. The cuts are going to have real impacts. We know that. We know they can't just be, attrition and cut back on Post-it notes. This is going to be significant. So you're going to get a real sense of what this government is going to do. And I don't think, if you look back to 1994 and 95, when Paul Martin made his sort of huge budget, they rolled that out over a number of years. Mark Carney doesn't have that luxury.
No.
So everything that we're going to see is going to come out on Tuesday. It's a big day for this government.
But Steph, I'll just go back to you. Conservatives don't want an election right now. I mean, I know that Pierre Poilievre was not in any way definitive with me, but surely that's not something that would make sense for them right now either.
No, I mean, in so many ways, it wouldn't make sense. And, there's a lot of joking going around on the Hill the last few days about, okay, how's this budget going to pass? And more than one Conservative MP being like, hey, man, put some community centers in my riding and I'm your guy. Like, nobody wants this election. And the math that'll be required, we're not talking a yawning gap of votes that are required, Rosemary, right? I mean, we're talking a handful, 3, 4. There's a lot of ways to get to 4 votes for your budget that don't involve the Conservative Party, the official opposition, en masse voting for it, or the Bloc, or the New Democrats. So, whether that means horse trading. And again, I find this part kind of politically very interesting to watch because Mr. Carney really doesn't seem to have any interest in playing politics whatsoever with this. I mean, we can, or, generally think about how fast he put Pierre Poilievre back in the House of Commons by calling that by-election. So if there's no horse trading available, if there's no, okay, fine, I will give you those community centers. If he's not interested in that, the onus really does become on the opposition parties to figure out a way. And, the run of Harper Conservative minority governments, 06, 08, at least one of those budgets passed because the Liberal caucus just sort of shrugged and said, you know what, we just really don't want an election. So how about some of you just don't vote?
Yeah. And I would think, Emilie, some of that may just be because, some Conservatives don't think it's the worst budget ever. And they just either don't show up or, to your point, that the NDP just allows some people to abstain.
Yes. And yes to the NDP. As far as the Conservatives are concerned, it was also just, 2 weeks ago that Pierre Poilievre was in the middle of a trouble for going after Justin Trudeau, and that revealed some tensions within his caucus of some Conservative MPs thinking that Mark Carney isn't the worst, and that the hyper-partisan attacks are actually creating lines of tensions and fictions within Conservatives, not only caucus but also their membership and their base as well. And so they're also speaking a good game with not as much of a leg to stand on than they could pretend they do.
Last word to you, Ryan.
I mean, I agree with everything that's been said so far. I'll say this, though. I talked to MPs from all parties. Everyone says they don't want an election. But it's like they're all in a car driving towards a cliff and waiting for someone to grab the steering wheel, and no one seems to want to grab it, as if they don't really understand what the steering wheel is for.
Well, we'll hope it's not a Thelma and Louise moment on Tuesday.
I mean, I don't really want to campaign. I don't know anyone who does, but stranger things have happened.
That's right. We're ready for anything. Thank you all for being here on this Sunday. Appreciate it. Nice to see you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Lots of anticipation for Tuesday's federal budget as the government looks to boost the economy that is facing pressure from U.S. tariffs and trade uncertainty. The Bank of Canada just last week cutting the overnight interest rate 25 basis points, with Governor Tiff Macklem saying they are expecting weak growth in the Canadian economy through 2026. With me now to talk about the state of the Canadian economy ahead of the upcoming budget is Jimmy Jean. He is the Vice President, Chief Economist, and Strategist with Desjardins Group. Nice to see you again.
Thanks for having me.
I'm going to start with what often gets a lot of attention on Budget Day, and then we can dig a little bit deeper. But the deficit, we are expecting it to be in the range of $70 to $100 billion. I know there's other indicators to look at when you're evaluating the state of the economy, but how concerned are you if we see a deficit of that size?
Well, by now, it's pretty much, it's given the streak of announcements we've been getting since the beginning of the year, that's pretty much, we're at 75 billion. So it's part of the psyche. It would be surprised if it were something significantly lower than that. So I think by now, really the focus is not so much on yes, it's still the size of the deficits, but what they're used for. Really, what's the end game for that we're getting in return to incurring these big deficits, and that speaks to whether those deficits will be producing the sort of economic growth that will be needed down the line in order to make those deficits sustainable.
So what will you look for then to get a sense of whether this is, in fact, as the Prime Minister has said, to try and attract investment and get more growth? Where will you look at where the money is going? How will you make that determination?
We've seen those announcements about nation-building projects. There's a first set of projects that have been announced. There's a second announcement that will be made mid-November. So really, it's about the selection of those projects. But also, I think, and that's the part that's more difficult to know beforehand, is how well the government will be able to execute them. Because making major investments, that's not a new story. When the Trudeau government got elected, the Invest in Canada plan had $185 billion they were supposed to inject into the economy. They ended up delivering only $110 billion, and that's the result of those difficulties in executing and delivering those projects. So really, that's going to be the big focus. The Carney government has put in place a number of structures that it promises will be able to deliver, but there's no way of knowing beforehand. So it's going to be a little bit of a leap of faith. We know with infrastructure there tends to be cost overruns, delays. Any infrastructure project you've seen in the last 5 years has been subject to that. But the key is whether the private sector really wants to join in, wants to participate, whether it has the proper signal really to get private investment unlocked.
And given sort of the instability of the world, I would argue right now, because of Donald Trump's trade war on us and others, would you expect that there might be something in the budget to reflect that instability and what Canada has been, the pressure Canada has been under because of the tariffs?
Right, but I think the Carney government and Prime Minister Carney himself, the consistent message has been we need to focus on what's in our control. And so that means leveraging our endowments in things like critical minerals. It means trying to diversify our export markets. Now, none of that will happen overnight, that's for sure. So there's going to need to some patience, which is in short supply these days. But we do need to work more fundamentally on competitiveness, on productivity. And that's where we've been failing consistently over decades. If we're not competitive enough, we're not going to have markets or market shares that we're going to be able to grab in overseas markets, be it in Asia or be it in Europe. And so I'm going to be looking very closely as to what the budget proposes in terms of incentives to really get private investment going, and particularly in everything that relates to innovation, AI, which the U.S. does very well right now, and where we have a lag, and R&D.
Okay, last question. I know that growth is projected to be soft again in 2026. Is a recession still a possibility, or could this budget and what it lays out sort of be a buffer against that?
Well, we just had the numbers on Friday, and the indication here is that the GDP could come in at the positive 0.6% in the third quarter after registering a 1.6% decline in the second quarter. So the good news is that we're not in recession. We continue to see some resilience on the consumer front. And even on the home building front, the Bank of Canada is cutting rates, so that provides a bit of support. The government also cut taxes. So we don't expect the economy to undergo recession. We think domestic demand is still resilient. And, much of our economy is not really directly exposed, at least to tariffs. But it's still the case that in those industrial sectors that are directly affected by sectoral tariffs, you're going to see weakness, you're going to see closures and job losses.
Okay, Jimmy Jean, always nice to see you. Thank you for making the time for us today. Jimmy Jean is the Vice President, Chief Economist and Strategist with Desjardins Group.